What is the best bow wood? This is probably the most common question that I get whenever I let anybody know that I make primitive replica weapons. And it's a really difficult question to answer because there is really no correct answer to it. There are different types of wood that exist around the world that have historically been used to make weapons. And there are woods that have not historically been used to make weapons but still can make a good quality serviceable hunting bow. Now, this bow that I have here, this bow is the reason I got into bow making. This is a horn-tipped Yew English Longbow. It's made to classic English longbow dimensions. It is oval in its profile. Actually, it's a little bit D-shaped in its profile, if I'm honest. And that D-shape meaning that the back of the bow is flat, the belly of the bow kind of rounds out in a circle shape. And there's a reason that the English used this particular wood to make bows in the place where they made their bows. Now, there's some areas of the world where this is actually not a good bow wood to use. And there's a lot of reasons for this, but I'm going to get started and I'm going to talk about first compression strength and tension strength, because these are the two qualities that make any type of wood serviceable for making a bow. Now, tension strength is what is needed for the wood on the back of the bow, or the surface that's pointing away from the archer. That surface, as the bow bends, is being stretched. So, in order for the bow to hold together and not break, those fibers in that wood, as they're bending, have to be flexible enough that they're not going to pull apart and snap and cause the bow to fail. Now, on the other end of the bow, on the belly of the bow, the surface facing the archer, this wood needs to be strong in compression because, as you can see, when I pull the bow back, that bow is compressing down on that belly section. So that wood needs to be resistant. It needs to push against that stretching motion, and that's what allows the bow to spring back powerfully and shoot that arrow forward. And yew happens to be a really phenomenal wood for that for one particular reason. That is that yew typically has a very thin layer of white sapwood that's very strong in tension, and a much thicker layer of heartwood that's incredibly strong in compression. So you have almost a natural composite material in this type of wood. Now, where I found that yew can actually be less than an ideal wood is when you're in a very cold, dry environment. I had one bow that I made out of yew that was one of my favorites. It actually was shaped front to back like a snake. Each limb looked like a snake, and it fired about exact center shot because of the way that the handle curved. And I was shooting that bow in probably about 7-degree weather, and as I was trying to warm the bow up, I was, when you shoot a primitive bow like this, you really should get a little bit of heat inside of the internal structure of the wood. There's something that happens called hysteresis. But anyhow, when you start exercising that bow, you draw it back a little bit, a couple of times, and that puts some internal heat inside of the limbs that allows them to become flexible. And this particular bow, I pulled it back maybe about halfway to its normal draw length, and it snapped into 4 equal pieces. And what that tells me is that bow was built perfectly, because when a bow breaks, it will break at its weakest point. So the fact that this bow broke into 4 equal pieces told me that I had shaped that bow properly, that the tension was evenly distributed along all those limbs, but the difference in the temperature that I had made the bow, which was 75 degrees with probably 80% humidity, was too great a difference from the temperature at which I was shooting the bow, which was 7 degrees and probably, I don't even want to guess on humidity, but very low. And wood will change in its characteristics. As wood drops in humidity, it becomes stiffer, which increases its draw weight. So this bow, this bow here shoots roughly around 55 to 60 pounds in the summer, is probably going to shoot somewhere between 60 and 65 pounds in the winter. And that's just by virtue of the difference in the moisture content of it. You can do some things to try and manage that, manage the humidity of the place that you store the bow, etc. Always make sure that you store it horizontal so that you're not having a difference in the humidity at the bottom of the storage area and the top, so that you don't have one limb that's heavier than the other, which will lead to a weak spot just by virtue of the difference in the humidity in the wood at the top of the bow and humidity in the wood at the bottom of the bow. But yew is an excellent wood overall for making bows, in most environments, just not extremes. And the next bow that I'm going to show you guys is, it's made from a white wood called ash. Ash is a hardwood. Baseball bats are made from ash, and I'll show it to you. And you can see already how different this bow is in its design and shape from that English longbow. I'll hold the two up so you can kind of compare. You know, one's really wide and thin, and the other one's narrow and almost, you know, it's circular in its shape. And this one also has these levers on the tips, which it's a lever tip bow, which is a sort of piece of technology that our ancestors developed to make a bow that would shoot faster, etc. But this wood is what you see here on the back surface. Some of these dark lines, if you can see them, this is actually some of the bark from the wood, from the tree. Yew and ash both, you don't have to carve down to the hardwood to the sapwood to make the bow. These bows, you can just peel the bark right off, get your bow to shape, balance it out, and your bow's going to work. This bow being a lever tip bow, you can see most of the bend happens in this portion of the limb. What that does is that gives me a longer bow, which gives me a longer draw length safely, but has the benefits of having the speed of a shorter limbed bow. And ash, again, is a classic sort of wood that bows are made from. It's a good solid bow wood. It's considered to be a little bit inferior to yew for a number of reasons, but to be honest, this bow and that bow shoot very similar. They're both good performing bows. The next one I'm going to show you guys, this is an Osage orange flatbow. This orange color that's on this wood, front and back, this is the natural color of the wood. There's no stain that's been added to this. Osage starts out a light yellow or a bright yellow when you first cut the tree, and then as it gets exposed to sun, the color it'll oxidize and turn like a darker orange copper color. And as it ages very beautifully. And this wood's very different because when you first cut this piece of wood, there was about an extra layer about this thick that I had to cut down. Now with some woods, when you make a bow from them, they don't have a lot of tension strength in the sapwood, so you need to get rid of it. And that means waiting for the bow to dry, waiting for the wood to dry, and cutting it all off using a draw knife and scrapers and sandpaper and other types of tools until you get just one pure solid growth ring with no scratches cut through the grain. So essentially what you have is these, wood is made from fibers called lignin. It's like you have a mat of lignin fibers spread out and you've not cut through any of those fibers. And that can be a really challenging thing as you're making a bow from a wood like Osage. You're taking off that sapwood. It's really easy to dig a little bit too deep and to cut a nick across some of those fibers, those lignin fibers that make up this growth ring on the wood. If you do that, then you no longer have a joined surface in that wood, and so you have lignin that's attached to a lower layer down here, lignin that's attached to a lower layer down over here, but not here and in between the two. So as the bow pulls and stretches, there's a weak point, and that can cause the bow to break and fail at that section. So you have to be perfect, absolutely perfect in making sure that you don't violate those lignin fibers in the back of that growth ring. Now this bow, Osage, the heartwood, is incredibly strong in both tension and compression, and it can make a variety of different styles of bow. So you can have a flat bow like this where the limbs are a little bit wider and thinner, or you can make the limbs very narrow and round in section. Most people who make an Osage bow will typically make the bow somewhere between 1.5 inches, 2 inches wide, and right around 5-6 feet long. This is a relatively short bow. It shoots 50 pounds at 26 inches, which have a nice primitive arrow that I made here, and I can show that to you guys. So this is this bow at full draw. And this is without any lamination on the back of this bow. This is a pretty hefty draw length for a short bow like this. But Osage orange can handle it, and that's why Osage is considered one of the most superior bow woods in North America. What I have to show you next is an example that it doesn't really matter what the wood is so long as you respect the qualities of that particular piece of wood. Now, all types of woods have different amounts of, they have different density, they have different tension strength, they have different compression strengths. And as long as you balance all those characteristics out together, you can make a very good performing bow. Now, for some pieces of wood like pine, which is not dense at all and isn't all that strong in tension or compression, it's a good structural wood for things like houses, but for something that's going through extreme abuse like a bow does, you would need to have a bow made out of pine that was like 3 or 4 inches wide and maybe 6 or 7 feet long. So that would be a very unwieldy bow for hunting with. And as you get those lengths that long, other things about it change. Like you're hitting a very long string, so that string's going to be heavy, and you're going to have more limb mass out towards the ends of the tips of the bow. So that's going to slow your bow down. So it's not going to be as good a shooting a bow as something that's able to balance out all those things together. So this bow is from European Buckthorn, also 55 pounds. And I think I pull it to about 24 inches, but we'll see. Yeah, that looks about 24 inches. But this is a really short bow, and European Buckthorn is not known for being a good quality bow wood. But as you can see, here I am, drawing at 24 inches, and when I go to unstring this bow, you'll be able to see it holds a pretty good profile still. You know, it's still relatively flat in terms of the shape, and what that means is that this bow is able to resist that compression force of drawing back, which means it's able to better propel that arrow forward. So I hope that helps somewhat with answering the question, what is the best bow wood out there? I just showed you examples of a whitewood, a hardwood, and an interesting combination of both, I guess, with the yew. 2 classic bow woods, 1 bow wood that's considered inferior, but yet is able to make a bow that performs just as well as the other 2, and 1 made from an atypical wood that kind of came out as a really great performing surprise. So if you have any questions, post them in the comments. I'll be able to get to them, and you guys enjoy making bows.